All right, ladies and gentlemen, today we are starting two-step equations from lesson 1.2. Step 1, we're going to add or subtract, and we're going to do that first. Step 2, multiply or divide. So essentially you're taking your skills that you were working on just the other day, one step at a time, but now we're going to go ahead and combine them into two steps. So we've got some sample problems here helping you out. Try and go nice and quick to be able to give you some strategies. All right, so again, remember, you're taking your notes because, again, you could use these later on. So let's see, adding, subtracting first. So I will go ahead and move this 4 by subtracting 4 on both sides because 4 subtract 4 gives me 0. I don't have to write the 0, but again, make sure you line it up nice and neat. Make sure your equal signs line up. I have an 8x. A negative 12 and a negative 4 is going to give me a negative 16 when I combine those integers, and then I'm going to go ahead and divide. So that's going to give me a value of x is equal to negative 2. Now remember, on the check process, you're going to take whatever you think the answer is and you're going to substitute it back into the original problem. So that would look something like this: 8 multiplied by negative 2. Add 4, and that's supposed to give me a negative 12. I've got a negative 16 plus a 4, and does that actually give me a negative 12? Well, if you use your number line or you use your rules, yes, negative 12 does equal to negative 12. Now again, you're just not going to write it. You need to actually think it through, because remember, the rules for the integers when you are having different signs is to subtract. So 16 subtract 4 is 12, and then you take the sign from the greatest absolute value. So that's negative 12. All right, this one right here, we got to be really careful with that negative sign. A lot of students, for whatever reason, simply forget about it. So we're going to subtract 2 both sides. So when I line it up with my equal sign, I need to remember negative 7m. A lot of students, when they rush through it, they just bring down the 7m, and that would give you a different answer. If I divide both sides by negative 7, then that means, of course, the value of m is equal to negative 7. Now, let's say you did a hypothetical of you thought it was positive 7. So when you go to your check, if you thought it was a positive 7, your check would look like this. And remember, you're trying to get a 51. So this would say a 2 subtract a 49. Now, does a 2 subtract a 49 give you a 51? No. So that means you would be aware of, okay, I did something wrong. Let me go back. It was the negative sign. So it's negative 7 for the value of m. So when you substitute it correctly, negative 7 multiplied by negative 7 is positive 49. So that does work. It does give you 51 is equal to 51. Again, the check is a really good, excellent test-taking strategy, especially when negatives are involved, because that's one of the biggest mistakes for students. They understand the concept of the movement, but they got to be careful with the negative sign. All right, let's add 3 this time. So that gives me a negative 2a is equal to, well, negative 9 plus 3, different signs, subtract, gives me a 6. Take the absolute value, or take the sign of the greatest absolute value, so negative 6. When I divide by negative 2, excuse me, a is equal to 3. All right, checking, so I'm not going to pretend I did something wrong. I'm just going to check exactly what I have, 3. So that gives me negative 2 times 3, subtract 3 is equal to negative 9. Negative 2 times 3 is negative 6. Subtract 3. And then remember, you could change this to adding the opposite, or you might just know a negative 6 and negative 3, same signs. So I'm going to go ahead and add it and keep the sign. So the check looks great there. The fractions, remember, you might have a simple 1 here, or you might have a different value like a 3. Whatever the case may be, we're going to go ahead and start with the add or subtract part first, though. So that's going to give me 1 over 2x. So I could actually write it like this if I like to. Half of an x is equal to 4. And then, of course, I'm going to go ahead and multiply using my reciprocal. So there's a reciprocal of 1/2 is 2/1. The simplified answer would be x is equal to 8. Please don't write your answer as 8/1. 8 is your answer. For your check, we have 4 plus, now it says 1x or just x, so that's 8 divided by 2 because the value of x is 8. So that's really just 4 plus 4, which is a basic, yeah, it works. But again, I'm looking for this comparison, the two numbers, because later on, when we are comparing with more advanced problems, you want to have it as a same value. Later on the advanced ones, it might not actually be the same value, and we'll talk about that later. All right, let's actually change this to a 2 here. So we're going to go ahead and subtract 7 of both sides. So that's going to give me a -2. Don't forget the negative sign. Thirds. I'm going to put my k there. 4 subtracted 7 is going to give me a -3. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and again multiply by the reciprocal. So that's going to give me -3/2 inside each parentheses. On the left side, everything simplifies to give me a positive k, which is what we were looking for. Now, if you notice here, it is going to be a positive, so that's a negative multiplied by negative, of course, is a positive there. And one time, oh, you know what? I can't do any cross canceling, so I'm just going to go ahead and leave it in the improper fraction form of 9/2. Now, I'm not going to ask you to put it into a mixed number, and you'll see why when we do our check. So again, could not cross cancel, so I just multiply, leave it as an improper fraction. On the check, I've got -2 multiplied by, again, our k is 9/2 divided by 3 plus 7, and we hope to get a 4. So the plus 7 equals 4 gets to stay the same. Right here, if you notice, I really have the ones cross cancel, which means I can technically ignore them. So I really just have a -9. And a -9 divided by 3 is going to give me a -3. -3 plus 7, does that give me 4? Well, you got different signs, so we're going to subtract. That gives me a 4. And I'm going to take the sign from the greatest absolute value, which is going to be a positive sign. So yeah, it works out. Beautiful. And according to this, we've got maybe 1 or 2 more. You know what? This one looks almost the same. So let's skip F. And let's go to quote-unquote wrong side. Now remember, our goal essentially is to hopefully have the variable on the left side. The left side is a little bit easier for students, especially when you get into the more advanced problems. So let's just say you had something like this. 10 is equal to 2x plus 4. Now that is quote-unquote the wrong side. So what I ask my students to try and make it just a little bit easier for them to try and keep things consistent is to just go ahead and make a small adjustment. So instead of 10 equals, let's say equals 10. So you would use that with your pencil on the worksheet, and then you would just lightly cross that off. Now you have a normal problem to complete. You do your adding, subtracting first, multiplying, dividing second, but again, it looks just a little bit better. And when you get into really advanced problems again, it might be helpful to simplify it, and then when you get to this point, just make sure the variable's on the left side. I teach it that way because again, it's easier later on the more difficult problems. So again, another idea, let's say it's -3 is equal to 2/5 x, subtract 1. All you have to do is, again, put the equal sign here, And then the -3 goes right there. Lightly cross it off with your pencil, and now you get to complete the problem. All right, that is pretty much the majority of what I wanted to remind you on how to solve two-step equations. Again, this is day 1. Day 2 is going to be a little bit more complicated. You got multi-steps involved, but right now, two-step equations. Add or subtract, then multiply or divide. All right, be awesome.